Yeah. And it'd be a positive thing. And then the other one that we saw that we were really interested in was we want to hear more policy influence by behavior analysts.
Influence on policy, okay. Somebody mentioned Lenny Jason's work with Stephen Fawcett yesterday about it. They actually did a randomized trial, behavior analysts, did a randomized trial of the use of letters, sending letters to the legislators in the Illinois legislature about the value of child restraints. And they randomly assigned, excuse me, half of the legislators to get these letters and half not, and they had a significant impact on voting, right? Actually research on how to affect legislators' voting. Okay, so what do we got? Wait, did we do? Is that it on here? Okay. What do we got on field? What would we be feeling differently?
Okay, so generally speaking, we'd like to be feeling more accomplished as a science, I guess, and we'd like to feel like we're free to make an impact on saving the world in other areas, and I think what that really means is feel like we know how to do that. And we want to feel like we're making positive impacts outside of autism, and we also kind of want to feel accepted by the other sciences as a science.
As a science,
yeah.
Right.
So okay. Like a little bit of respect.
You know, I know a lot of people in the behavioral sciences. I've been president of the Society for Prevention Research. I'm involved in Association for Contextual Behavioral Science, and I've done a lot of research on the prevention of cigarette smoking and a wide variety of adolescent problems, and done other things. So I've gotten to know all these people. And there's an awful lot of people who actually have heard of behavior analysis, but they don't consider themselves behavior analysts. But you know, all the people who developed all these family interventions I talked about yesterday, most of those people are quite sophisticated about contingencies and reinforcement and so on. Jerry Patterson was actually good friends with Bijou and Baer back in the 60s. They used to meet, between Eugene and Seattle. They'd meet in Centralia and drink and fish, is what I understand, and talk about the possibility that human behavior could actually be, a function of its consequences and so on. So there are a lot of people who are, who are, would be sympathetic to that, if you don't come at them with, you idiots, which, I mean, Jerry, who's to me is a giant in the field, he just died at the age of 90 about 2 months ago. But he was actually a very sensitive person. And on the one hand, he wanted to be the man who invented music, like a lot of the guys in the 1960s who started in this science. But at the same time, he was very sensitive, sensitive to criticism. So, it's, I sometimes feel like I'm the Rodney King of the behavioral sciences. Can't we all get along? So, what do we got for, where are we at? Do?
So we had found a couple of themes within these. First one was like collaboration with other fields, we've heard of it today. Finding internal motivation and being like excited about analyzing behavior in its own right. Serving more underprivileged populations, saving the world, and doing more research.
And doing more research, which will hopefully contribute to saving the world. Which of course you have to watch, because if you're not careful, you'll be doing research and it won't seem, it won't be that relevant. And this is a huge problem, right? I mean, you give me one person, and I have some control over their environment. I can do some useful research, but how do we get ExxonMobil to change its practices in such a way that it truly supports reduction in the use of fossil fuels, which has a terribly negative consequence for the stockholders of ExxonMobil? So what do we got in terms of what would we see less of?
So that's us. We saw themes of less negativity and isolation within behavior analysis.
Say that again?
Less negativity towards us,
right.
And then less isolation of the field,
right.
Which other people have talked about. Additionally, less focus in universities of only teaching autism-related courses. And with that, less focus on one population.
We also want to see less of the same research.
Less
of the same research, same area of research, and even within the same area, the same type of literature. And then less arrogance within the field.
Okay. And what would we, where are we at?
Here.
What would we feel less?
Here.
You're less.
Here.
There were 3, like, particularly common classes. Like 38% of people said something along the lines of complaining about other fields or something to that effect. 25% of people were worried about criticisms of behavior analysis, though, which is kind of interesting. So we get sort of this rock throwing across the fence. And then 12.5% of people said that they wanted to hear less about autism. And then there were some like smaller, like minority opinions that I think are interesting, like hearing less about playing nice with other fields, which again kind of relates to those other 2. And then less rah-rahing about saving the world.
Well, that's certainly a minority view. We don't like that view. So I'm writing this essay on prejudice because I think that it's a huge problem in society, and I truly think that the things we're doing to deal with it are actually counterproductive. There's growing evidence of that. So one of the lines of research that I discovered is a guy named Hornsey in Australia, and he has studied intergroup conflict. And he's done a bunch of experimental studies testing the impact of criticism of a group on the members of that group. And he's basically found that if the members of a group criticize the members of another group, it's just very unlikely that the members of that other group will accept the criticism. So just to give you one example, he did a study where, this is in Australia, so he had this study where Australians were given input about the prejudices of Australians, and they were given by ostensibly an Australian, or a Brit, or an American, right? And guess what? They were significantly more likely to dismiss the criticisms if they came from somebody who wasn't an Australian. And they even studied, they had separate evidence that when these criticisms were buttressed by empirical evidence about these things, that people were more likely to say, yeah, that's probably true. But when they came from a foreigner, they were rejected anyway, even with this, buttressing evidence. So, you look at that and you go, and I mean, what is the dominant means by which people are trying to deal with divisions in society? It's basically to get among your friends and talk about those people and how they're wrong. Now, I'm a liberal Democrat from Eugene, Oregon, and I actually have a passage now in this essay, and in another one I've written. It is basically saying it is no longer sufficient for people who are concerned about society to get together with their friends at a cocktail party or a dinner party and talk about how terrible these people are. If that conversation doesn't involve the specification and the moving forward on concrete action to do something about these problems, then you had a nice dinner, but the republic is not getting any better. There has